Hello and welcome to this first impressions review of Toys Outrider. Another figure that I've had on order for a long time, seemingly been waiting forever since the initial renders, etc. Finally here, with mixed results I think. I think first off you can see from the packaging, this is not your standard Toys release, very different than usual, very minimalistic design. With just a schematic of Outrider on the front there, and pretty plain. Interesting to note that the back of the box has a bio, but it's a bio for Tesla. Yeah, someone somewhere wasn't really doing their quality control job, were they, when they printed this up? So yeah, no bio for Outrider there. Quite disappointing, to be honest. Not a great effort. I can only imagine that the reason that this is like it is and not Toys branded, as you'll see there's no Toys branding on it, and they normally plaster their name over everything. I can only assume the reason is because of the Takara Trailbreaker that's being released. They didn't want to draw too much attention to it, but it's pretty obvious what it is, isn't it? So yeah, this is not really what I'd expect for Toys. Anyway, let's pop the box to one side because that's the boring bit, isn't it? What do you get in the box? Well, you get the usual manual, colour manual showing the figure and the transformation stages. I did think this was quite amusing in the back. In order to avoid damaging surface or paint, please don't let parts scratch each other. Well, I think that's very much down to your engineering, isn't it, Toys? It's not really down to the user. I don't think people are going out there to scratch their figures on purpose, are they? Anyway, yep, gives you all the instructions you need. Blah de blah. Another bit of not terribly exciting stuff. And finally, in this little unboxing section, you get the usual collector card. Although again, we have a bio on the back. This time for Rig, so they seem to be running through their collection. Yeah, I don't know what's gone on here. It's very odd. Really sloppy from Toys, this, I have to say. But what are you going to do? I mean, these aren't the important bits, are they? But yeah, whatever. Let's actually bring the bot himself in, and then we'll go through accessories, articulation, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, just give me a second. Okay, and here we are back with the figure itself, and yeah, I mean, first impressions, it looks the part, doesn't it? I think it's a very nice looking version of the character. Not 100% toon accurate. Figures seldom are they? But this is a pretty good representation of the character in my mind. I just want to go through a couple of the accessories before we actually get into the figure in detail. Very typical Toys, you don't actually get all that much. You get a replacement hand, which I think I can show you here. I do actually think the hands on this are better than previous Toys efforts, and they seem to be getting better in that respect. They look a little bit more natural than they did before, not oversized, and they tended to be just like kind of rectangles on the end of a palm, which was itself another rectangle, but these look slightly better sculpted. That can be swapped out, as an optional hand instead of the gun arm. You have to disassemble that, and there's a screw you need to do and all that. It's in the manual. I prefer his classic look, so I'm going to leave him like that. I know he had both looks in the toon, but that was generally an animation error. You also get this little gun, which the eagle-eyed among you will recognise as being very similar to the gun wielded by Ratchet, Ironhide, Bumblebee, etc. So it's a bit of a generic Transformer weapon, this one. And you never really saw Trailbreaker using this because he tended to use his own gun arm, but it's there if you want it. And I'll show this off more in alt mode, but this is the little radar dish that you get, which was featured in the show. And you get some alternate faces. Now, it's slightly curious this. I do think his face sculpt's pretty good. This is his alternate face here, the screaming face, and I really like this one actually. I think this is a really good looking face sculpt. You also get two others. This is the same face sculpt with a shorter chin. I will try and bring this in for comparison. I don't know if it will show up that well. But yeah, it's the same face sculpt, it just has a shorter chin, which is very curious. Firstly, I thought it was maybe because of articulation or something, because of the way the head's designed, but it's not. I'm assuming he did have a couple of different looks in the Toon, I guess, but I do prefer the long face on it. And of course, you know, it only stands to reason that you get a short-chinned version of his stock face, which is the more neutral face expression, which is what he's currently got on, which is what he comes fitted with out of the box. I'm almost certainly going to swap mine over for the long-chinned screaming face. That's the one I like, but we'll go through that in a bit. But anyway, that's it for accessories. What else do you get with the figure? Well, you get some good stuff and you get some bad stuff, I will say. As I said, I think it looks the part. I really like the proportions. I think it's very clean. If you look at it all the way around, you know, it's got a very clean back. That's really nice. It's, you know, everything tidies up really well. You know, the feet look fairly good. The arms look good. I like these attachments that you get, and you know, they're on armatures, so you can pose them however you want. Yeah, aesthetically speaking, I think he looks really good, and I'm pretty close to the Toon in a lot of respects. Certainly the silhouette is very close. The animation model is a bit different than he was drawn in the Toon. The animation models are always exaggerated, but he was a bit beefier up top, and he had sort of long, skinny legs, and the knees were slightly different in terms of their proportions, etc. But by and large, this is right. Colour-wise, I'm slightly disappointed that Fan Story seems to have taken inspiration from the erroneously coloured fan version of the Toon model that's out there, where these parts are lighter. In the show, they were sometimes light, but again, the exceptions to the rule. Ordinarily, they were much darker grey. These pieces here, these pieces here, these pieces here, and that's what the Takara version is bringing to the table when it's released. Had that been the case with this figure, aesthetically, I would have said it beats the Takara version. I think the Takara version's gone a step too far in its stylisation. Actually, it's gone a bit further away from the character than I would have liked. This actually looks better in this pose anyway. So I think, you know, when you're just actually looking at it, I think the proportions are really good. I think it really, really does sell Trailbreaker for me. I really love this sort of gunmetal they've gone with. You know, it's not quite black. It's you know, charcoaly. It looks really lovely. But yeah, I do lament the fact that this is not a darker grey. It's not white. It's a bit like their Soundwave, you know, the Robot Paradise Soundwave, where it's more of a sort of pearlescent paint, and it's got kind of a grey, light grey tone to it. It doesn't really come across in camera. That washes it out and makes it look white, but in person it does look very light grey. So I can kind of rationalise that and trick myself into thinking, well, you know, it is grey, even though it's not as grey as it is. So it's Trailbreaker from some of his animation mistake episodes. I mean, I could go on all day about, you know, it looking the part, but it's really, it needs to be able to perform the basic functions as well, and that's where this falls down in my mind. And I'll go through that now. I mean, let's start really with the top-down articulation checklist, shall we? I mean, as I said, these things are on armatures and they can move. It's slightly more behind his head than I'd liked. I'd like it to come out a bit more if we could, but, you know, it's all right. This one has a bit more range of motion because this moves up and down, and this is on a ball joint, so you can pose this how you see fit. It's pretty good. I like that. The head, I don't like the head design. Hound came in for a lot of criticism for very similar head design. Hound, as you remember, had a floating head that was on an armature. This is similar, but the armature is supposed to clip in. But because of the way the panel is on the back, and obviously, you know, this not being it's a right angle, but you know, it's not, the tolerance isn't quite there, so you have to force it to get it to clip in, and it never really truly clips in. It kind of always wants to pop out when you move the head. So that's not great, but just thought that was worth mentioning because Fans Toys get a pass for a lot of bad decisions, whereas other companies don't. So I like to point them out. The head itself, it has a very slight range of motion up and down. It's quite disappointing, really, how slight it is. I'll do it from the side so you can see. That's down, that's up. That's really not much, is it? I mean, that's sort of their hot rod levels of articulation, and as you can see, that's now popped off again. It can rotate side to side, and you get slightly more range of motion there. But again, it's come undone, and it has an ever so slight amount of sort of side to side head tilt, swivel, call it what you will. And yeah, it keeps popping off. So I think you need to find a pose and keep it there because it's going to keep popping out otherwise. The arms are really my major issue with it. So at first glance, it looks quite good. Trailbreakers' arms are difficult anyway because of their design. They're a bit like Huffers in that they're not physically they wouldn't work, but because it's a cartoon, you can cheat it. But what they've done is, you've got a nice soft ratchet here, which, it does the job. It can go all the way around. But obviously you're always going to have interference from his arms on his main body. So you only get limited shoulder articulation. It can go up to about there. The big problem is that these wing mirrors that they've included, inexplicably included for alt mode, given that they're trying to go toon and the toon model doesn't have wing mirrors, A, they feel like they're going to snap if you catch them, and B, they get in the way. So you have to be really careful when you're positioning, and they do limit the posability. So you can only really get that much extension, not even sort of horizontal. It's just below the horizontal. That's not great. I feel like they could have done better with this, and that's especially true of the fact that there is no outward arm movement. So that's it. You can't move out. That's hugely limiting from an articulation point of view. You can kind of cheat it by sort of moving that up like that, but that's not great. Other companies can and have and will implement better designs. Takara obviously looks like it's got much better range of motion on the shoulders without sacrificing the look too much. And the MMC version, which I will bring in for comparison in a bit, also had better shoulders in terms of articulation, if not aesthetics. I feel that Fans Toys could have engineered something in here to allow for an outward movement. A secondary joint in there that could have done it. It's just that I very much, with this figure, as I get the impression this is an old design that they've sort of tarted up, as they've done with a few things, and then just gone, they've been sitting around for ages. We might as well make a few quid off of this now that Takara are releasing it. Their hot rod, their hood limit was the same. It's a very old, outdated design, and it showed. And I feel like this is a very similar kettle of fish. You do get a decent sort of swivel there at the elbow, or bicep swivel I should say. That does kind of allow you to cheat an outward movement like that. You can sort of cheat it, but it looks really odd. Again, you get a slightly over 90-degree bend on the elbow, so not brilliant, but again, not too bad, not double jointed. But again, going back to the point that nowadays, if this was a new figure, they probably would have double joint, or a new design, sorry, they probably would have double jointed elbows there. The cannon does move in and out, but that's for transformation, so you can stow it. It's not meant to be pushed in and out. This, as far as it extends, I don't think this is entirely screen accurate, but it's not too bad. The hands, or the hand, as I've shown already on the spare, individually articulated fingers, with pins at the base and at the knuckle, and then you have a solid one-piece thumb on a ball joint at the bottom as well, with a base pin. So yeah, you can get a lot of articulation out of the fingers. They actually are pretty good. Moving down, you have your usual waist swivel. That's pretty smooth. You also have very tight Oh, very tight. Ab crunch. Now, I say ab crunch, it's one of those where, a bit like the Transform Element Mirage, where you literally just feel like you're snapping the figure in half. And also like X-Transbot Savant, that entire hinge, the entire ab crunch is on this hinge. So it doesn't really look very natural. I mean, it's not very loose at the moment, but I could see it loosening up over time, and then it becomes just a floppy joint. I mean, as you get to there, it does just drop down. It can't really support its weight any, that's not great, is it? But yeah, very similar joint to the Transform Element Mirage. Breaks the sculpt totally as well. So, I guess it's good, it's there. You can utilise it to about there before it becomes a bit floppy. But yeah, not great, and also pretty tight. Quite scarily tight, in fact. Thankfully, the legs are a lot better. You have friction out to 90, and it's strong. It stays where you want it to stay, which is really good. You get a little bit of backwards movement, but not much due to the butt flap here. But that's just part of his design, so you can't really argue about that. And then you get a nice ratcheted kick forward. And as you can see, the skirts, the hip skirts, automatically fold up. They're on the top part of the assembly there. And obviously come back down. They're not spring-loaded like they are on MP44 or anything like that, but they just, they disappear when needed and come back when required. This next articulation, actually I forgot to say thigh swivel at the top. Pretty good range of motion. You can get right the way around to there. It's not bad. Yeah, sorry, the thing I was going to say was the knees. I've seen a lot of comments about these online, and I have to concur, although again, the Toon model has got some very weird designs. People have been complaining about the placement of the knees. Now, it would have to be here, you'd assume, but it would make more sense if it was at the top here, but it's actually at the bottom. And again, it's quite a nice deep knee bend, but people are saying that it makes the top of the leg look too long in comparison to the shins, etc. The thigh, I mean, that's true, the thigh does look a bit longer, but I think it's because people see this bit all as part of one contiguous bit of the knee, instead of like that being a thigh piece and that being a lower knee piece. So that kind of makes the illusion of it looking worse than it is. Again, I think it would have been better if the joint came from that piece there and bent there than here. But it is what it is. I don't think it looks terrible, but I kind of do agree that it does look a bit odd having his knee there. But the Takara one is similar, but it's implemented slightly better from what I've seen in pictures anyway. Moving on down, we come to like the last bit of any articulation checklist, and that is the ankle rocker here, which is fairly good. And then you have a little bit of pivot on the toe there. What I will say is that they're pretty loose. This was the better one, which is why I showed it off. This one's a lot worse. That is much looser there, and much looser back to front as well. And I will say that after manipulating them, they've become even looser since I took them out of the box. I believe there's a screw you can tighten the pivot on, but the rocker's on a pin, so there's no way of tightening that up. And even just posing him here, he has a tendency to want to lean rather than take the midpoint. You can get him there and he'll stay, but again, he will knock and move all too easily for my liking. So that's not great design again. They are not really, he's got a lot of heft to him up top. He is very top heavy, and the ankles, with these flimsy, skinny legs and these tiny ankles, they just can't support the weight. And again, I feel like, companies like Takara get a lot of grief for stuff like this with their MP52 mould. So I think it's only fair to point out when the revered companies such as Fans Toys make similar mistakes or have similar issues. But all things considered, it's not a terrible design. I just think the shoulders are the real weak point for me. That's a real shame, because it really limits the dynamism of the poses you can get him into. And also these ankles are slightly worrying. But other than that, I think, honestly, not too bad at all. It's it looks the part. I just think a few bits and pieces are lacking. Let me just demonstrate, actually, while I'm here, before we do an alt mode review. how you change the head or the face. I find it easier, like that's always going to pop off anyway, but then you lift up the face like this, and then that is on a peg, and it, oh, brilliant, his eyes fell off. Okay, I will sort that in a bit because we're not using his eyes at the moment. Oh no, hold on, they clip back on like that. Problem solved. Right, so that comes off, and then you take your replacement face. In this case, I want the long, shouty face, and you just get that, and you put the peg in like that, push it down, it clips in, and then the top of his head comes up for transformation. That has a tendency to do that again. Just pop that back down, and then inevitably you're going to have to push the bloody pegs into the notches again. And yeah, I think that looks really good. That's a much better face. It's very, very nice. And again, if his arm could move out, you could sort of imagine him staring off that way, shooting to the side, but it's very limited. Anyway, that's everything I want to talk about in robot mode. We'll get him transformed up. I'm not going to do it on camera, but I'll get him transformed up and I'll come back and we'll have a quick look. Oh, actually, before we do that, sorry, almost forgot. I did say I was going to bring in the MMC version, didn't I? And here he is. This is trusty old Courageous, who's been my, I'll just get these slightly more central. He's been my trailbreaker for a number of years now. And yeah, I mean, instantly you can see that Outrider is far more tune accurate in pretty much every way. You know, even the colours aren't too far off. I mean, that's a darker grey, but it's not, still not tune accurate. So there's not too much difference between this. The design of this guy's knees is also terrible. His feet obviously are just the back of a car. Even his gun arm, you know, that's a clip-on. You actually take that off, and the other fist is in there, so it's not even an integrated piece. I do like the way the bonnet collapses on this. Actually, I think that pushes in and collapses when you put into bot mode. That's really neat, and I wish they could find a way to do that for other versions. But you know, the face sculpt on this one's not brilliant. It's all right, but you know, not brilliant. The head sculpt's all right, but the face not, and it's very dark as well, so it kind of has a tendency just to blend in. Articulation wise though, I will say that the arms on this, you know, having that joint there that is inside the shoulder that comes out, you know, you can get that movement. If Fans Toys had engineered that into this guy, he would just really elevate him in my view. I think it would really bump him up a bit in my estimation. Sadly not to be. As you can see, that it still has these big shoulders. You know, I mean, they're not as accurate as this guy, I'll give him that. But I'm pretty sure Fans Toys could have engineered a better joint in the arms and shoulders to give it, you know, the range of motion it deserves. You even get a limited butterfly with this guy, don't you? And you've got, you know, pretty similar shoulder bend, etc. One thing I will say is better on Fans Toys, definitely better. This has got like very large ratchet notches, teeth, sorry, so the spacing's too large. It's not great when you want to pose him because he moves in these big increments. So it's not as good as Fans Toys in that respect, but you know, I still think this is a decent figure, and it's very surprising when you actually see that this has better articulation overall than the Fans Toys release. But obviously in terms of aesthetics and overall size, this is far more accurate. Anyway, right, now I really will get it transformed up and we'll come back with the alt mode review. So just bear with me. Okay, and we're back with a look at Outrider's alt mode here. And it's a good looking alt mode, I will say that. It's pretty tune accurate for my money. One or two things that aren't, which I'll cover. But on the whole, yeah, very nice looking alt mode. I'll just give you a quick 360 so you can get a good look at it. Yeah, I like it, and I think the sort of gunmetal colour really works possibly even better in this alt mode than it does in the bot mode. Transformation wise, wasn't very enjoyable, I will say. It's fairly intuitive, but there are a lot of fiddly bits. Trying to get everything stuffed up inside, you know, the bot limbs up inside is difficult. I found that the hinges on some of the rotating panels are very tight, and I found especially problematic was the armature for the head, which I honestly thought was going to snap, and I do think over time those would stress, so that's a concern. I almost certainly won't be transforming mine back into alt mode after I put it back to bot mode, that's for sure. The doors, getting these tabbed in was a pain, largely because once you have them in place, the legs have to be positioned and stuffed up, for want of a better term, in a particular way, and it's such a way that then forces everything to unclip and disconnect. So I had to mess around with it quite a lot to get it into this sort of, you know, solid mode where it holds together. And even then on mine there's still some gaps, so you'll see there's gaps on the door, a little bit there to an extent anyway. Mainly here there's a gap between the bonnet and the windshield. I don't think it's me. I mean, you know, you can push it in and it moves slightly, but it springs right back, and I can't see there's any way I could push that tighter, but maybe it is me. And again, like this clipping up here, it's not entirely flush, it's a little bit springy, but I guess these are kind of nitpicks. On the whole, it's pretty good. And when I actually roll it, it rolls very well, nice and smooth. Rubberized tyres, obviously. And yeah, aesthetically, as I said, I think it looks very good. Pretty on model for the Toon, apart from, ironically, the wing mirrors, which are not part of the Toon model and are just problematic in bot mode. So I wish they'd left them off entirely. Just if they'd omitted them, I don't think anyone really would have missed them. You know, they've gone for a very Toon look everywhere else, so I don't know why they've included that, especially in such a poor way. You know, the manner of inclusion is just not good enough, and that they're going to snap off, I can see. Other things I don't really like, they've gone for this kind of opaque paint job on the back for the window, and again up here the window is represented by paint, but on the side obviously they've gone for the translucent blue plastic. I don't know, just have one cohesive look. I mean, maybe go for the translucent blue on the windshield and side windows here, but it looks odd having the paint on those two. I mean, it's too inaccurate, they're supposed to be windows, but in the promo pics all of this was blue paint as well, sorry. So I would rather they'd had the whole back blue paint and then this, you know, with the translucent plastic. Other than that, I don't really have too much to say. You know, it's not a bad looking bot, is it, in alt mode? You know, it looks good. Yeah, not a lot of gimmicks, I will say that. Very fans toys, isn't it? You don't get a lot of accessories, as we've already established. But especially in alt mode, you know, there's no picnic table, for example, you know, that you had with the X-Transbox version. You do get sort of alt mode weapon storage, although this was a real pain to get in there. It was far more trouble than it was worth to demonstrate, but I did it anyway. It doesn't really notch in, it kind of just sits into two very shallow grooves, and then trying to get those legs clasped together and then pushed up in here with all the other additional issues I was having was a real pain. One thing I will note is that at the top here you'll notice that this is very untidy. Now this panel can be rotated, again on a very tight hinge, but you then get a flush surface, you know, for a much nicer look. But the reason I've left it like this was because you can't do it once it's transformed. It has to be done during transformation because there's no room for it to move because the arms are all stuffed up in there. So you have to make that decision as you transform, and the reason I've left it like that is just to demonstrate the one sort of play feature you do get in alt mode, which is his radar dish, which again was in at least one episode of the Toon. I forget if it was in more, but yeah, it looks nice enough, sort of chromed to match the grille, but it has limited articulation. It can rotate left and right, and it can, well, this is one of the issues with it. It doesn't stay in very well. It can pivot up and down, but again the hinge is very tight, so it does have a tendency to become dislodged. But you know, you can pivot it that way, so he can be, you know, scanning off into the distance there. Yeah, pretty basic play feature, pretty standard for Trailbreaker, but it looks the part. What I want to do just quickly is move him over here so we can bring in Terragus in alt mode. Obviously a far more, I would say, real world looking alt mode than Outrider. Outrider obviously very Toon stylized. This looks a lot more like a real world Toyota. I actually used to drive a Toyota Hilux, and obviously this looks very similar to that, albeit mine was pumped up on suspension, etc. But yeah, it looks nice, a lot flimsier than the Fans Toys release, but still holds up, I think, in alt mode. And you have obviously more weapon storage options on this than you do with Fans Toys. I think side by side Fans Toys wins aesthetically, but that's not to say that the MMC version is bad or anything like that. It's a nice enough looking bot, and it served me well, and it will probably sit out its days now, live out its days in alt mode on my duplicate shelf. Anyway, that's enough talking about the alt mode. I'm gonna take them off camera, get Outrider transform back into bot mode, and I'll come back with some final thoughts. Okay, and it was a lot easier to get him back into bot mode from alt mode than it was to get him from bot mode into alt mode. And after that experience, I don't know, I'm sort of still on the fence almost. I think the big problem with this was the money I paid for it. I got it from a UK retailer, and it was £160 plus postage, so the best part of 170 quid. And then it became apparent that just after mine was sort of due to ship, or around the same time mine was due to ship, a lot of Chinese sellers had discounts and things, and they were selling it for 40 quid less. So I do feel slightly like that would have been a much more realistic price point for this figure. It doesn't feel like a £160 figure at all. I mean, you know, solid, you know, a lot of die cast, chunky figure, doesn't feel poorly built, but, you know, definitely also very nicely painted. So don't get me wrong there, it's not that. It's just the limited articulation really feels like a Fans Toys basically taking the easy route and reusing an old design and slapping a nice fresh coat of paint on it. So yeah, I think if it had that additional articulation, the sort of stuff I bemoaned earlier in the review, then definitely that would have probably changed my mind on that point. I would say, yep, wholeheartedly, you know, I don't mind paying that kind of money for it. But yeah, it is quite galling when you pay that sort of sum of money for things, and then find out you can get it a lot cheaper. Hindsight's brilliant, isn't it? But overall, there are, you know, as I say, there are a couple of issues aside. It's a good figure. I don't want to come across as entirely negative. As you can see, it still looks the part here. You can kind of fake the pose with the arm. It doesn't look great, but you can kind of fake it. And yeah, he just looks so much cleaner than MMC, and I really like the stature. Scale-wise, this is definitely much more in keeping with where he should be, aligned with MP44, etc. I've seen people using the Ironhide ratchet mold to compare for scale, but that's not a great one to use because they're too big. They are themselves too tall. They should be at half a head at least shorter than they are. So he actually, I think, is pretty much the right height. Yeah, the issues I've talked about, obviously the shoulders, the ankles are the main ones. Nothing else really to niggle about too much. My paint job is actually pretty good as well. I will say that overall QC seems pretty good. I've got one little nick on the bumper, the bonnet here, which is annoying because it's obviously the front facing part of the bot, and that was there out of the box. But once I stick a fraction symbol on there, that's not even really going to show, is it? So yeah, again, I think he really does look the part. I still think I'm going to go in on the Takara release because it has better articulation than this guy, and a lot more accessories, and is actually cheaper, ironically. And I just want to see what it's like. I want to compare them. I may or may not get rid of one of them, depending. I mean, I have a bad habit of buying upgrades and then keeping the old bots anyway, so I'll definitely be keeping the MMC bot to rage us around. But yeah, for now, this is going to replace him on my shelf. This is going to be my new de facto trailbreaker in my collection. He's going to look really good in the display, and we'll see whether the Masterpiece version can knock him off. And we'll see what Takara does. So, should you buy it? I guess yes, if with a caveat that I would look to get it from one of the Chinese sellers, so you save yourself a considerable amount of money there. And just be aware of the limitations when it comes to articulation. But if you're like me and you put it into a relatively cool looking pose and then stick it in a display along with all your other bots and don't really fiddle with it, then yes, this is actually a really, really nice looking piece. And as I say, I think possibly even nicer looking overall than the Takara version, proportionally anyway. So yeah, that's it for me for this video. I don't actually have anything else on order at the moment, which is a strange thing for me. There are a few things I do want to order though. I want the Citizen stack from X-Transbots, but the version I want, the Toon version, apparently isn't due out until next year, even though the youth version, the toy version, is due out very soon. So that's disappointing. I do want the Masterpiece Trailbreaker, as I've said, so I'll probably get an order in for that. The rest of the stuff I want is some way off, I think. I want the XTB Galvatron, that's still some way off, probably next year or late this year. Yeah, I'm struggling to think of anything that's actually coming out in the near future. I mean, Jive and Phantom, those are both Fans Toys releases. Don't know when they're being released, but I have those on pre-order. But yeah, nothing else springs to mind at the moment. I've kind of got everything. Probably will go in on Fans Toys Parkour. That's looking really good from the early renders, and in fact the test shot I've seen. Although the face looks a bit off and the colours need to be tweaked a bit, but the actual sculpt itself looks much better than the Masterpiece version, although I probably will get the Masterpiece version as well. Anyway, I'm sure I'll have some other content along soon, even if it's not figure reviews. I might do some legacy figure reviews or some Transformers related stuff like I've done. Never quite as popular as the reviews, I know, but I do this for fun anyway. It's largely my enjoyment, and if other people happen to enjoy it even as well, all the better. So yeah, just remains for me to say thanks for watching and take care everyone. I will catch you in the next video.